Throughout American history, the country has watched as the rest of the world has created sprawling high-speed rail networks which not only provide economic opportunity but also environmentally friendly transit for the masses. Today, for the final episode of High Speed Rail Week 2, we'll be learning about the past, present, and most importantly, the future of high-speed rail in America, in addition to other projects in American rail modernization, such as the implementation of zero-emissions locomotives. While nowadays, it's a well-known fact that America is lacking when it comes to high-speed rail, believe it or not, that hasn't always been the case. Back in high-speed rail's beginning, America was actually an early adopter of the technology, implementing it as early as 1969. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start where it all began on October 1st, 1964, when Japan showed the world their new Shinkansen, or new trunk line, for the first time. Unlike any train before it, the Shinkansen was capable of speeds of up to 130 miles per hour, making the trip between Tokyo and Osaka in a record-breaking 4 hours. This new concept of high-speed rail, although expensive to build, created a huge impact on Japan's economy, allowing people to travel between Japan's two biggest economic centers in a few hours rather than a full day. Inspired by Japan's new train, many other countries around the world began to dabble in high-speed rail, including the United States. On September 30th, 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the High-Speed Ground Transportation Act of 1965, a piece of legislation that would go on to begin America's development of high-speed rail. From this point, North America's high-speed rail technology continued to develop, with some electric trains inspired by Japan's Shinkansen, and some developments of all original gas turbine trains. One example of such a train took place on December 20th, 1967, when the Canadian-designed UAC turbo train hit a top speed of 170 miles per hour while testing on the electrified Northeast Corridor in New Jersey. To this day, no train in America has gone faster than this, which really speaks to the fact that the United States used to be on the cutting edge of high-speed rail. 2 years later, Penn Central began their new Metroliner service, America's first functional high-speed rail, providing 125 mile per hour high-speed rail service between New York and Washington, D.C. This new train saw quite a bit of success, and at 125 miles per hour, it was only slightly slower than Japan's Shinkansen. Still, as other countries continued the development of their own high-speed rail, American passenger railroads found themselves in a state of decline as automobiles were quickly gaining more popularity. This situation reached a boiling point in 1970 when Penn Central, one of America's largest railroads, declared bankruptcy. With this, the government was forced to take over most privatized passenger rail in the country, with a new company being formed for this very purpose. On May 1st, 1971, Amtrak took over most privately funded passenger trains in America, and while it saved most American passenger rail services from discontinuation, it struggled to make a profit. This lack of profit quickly began a dark age for American passenger rail, in which Amtrak was just struggling to stay afloat, so anything more such as upgrading infrastructure was considered a pipe dream. For over 20 years, America's high-speed rail stayed the same as the rest of the world continued to improve. Finally, though, after many years of virtually no improvement, high-speed rail came back into the picture when on December 18, 1991, the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act was signed into law, laying out a plan for future high-speed rail corridors in the United States. Most importantly, though, it incentivized Amtrak to finally get on track to creating their own high-speed train service. Just under a year after the signing of this bill, on October 20th, 1992, a Swedish X2000 train set arrived in America to serve as a demonstration of what the future of American passenger rail could look like. Not only did the X2000 go on tour around America, but it also saw some revenue passenger service, giving regular people the opportunity to experience modern high-speed rail for themselves. A year later, on June 29th, 1993, the X2000 was joined by another foreign visitor, this time being a German ICE-1 train. The ICE did the same thing as the X2000, gaining publicity for high-speed rail in America. With these two trains showing their strengths and weaknesses on American infrastructure, Amtrak worked to create their own all-new train, which would be a combination of these two trains' strengths. On March 9, 1999, Amtrak introduced Americans to the country's first true high-speed rail, which was called the Acela Express. Using all new trains built by Alstom and Bombardier, the new Acela would provide service between Boston and Washington, D.C. at speeds of up to 150 miles per hour for the new millennium. In preparation for the Acela, the Northeast Corridor was fully electrified between New Haven, Connecticut and Boston, Massachusetts, allowing for the electric trains to run non-stop for the full 450-mile journey between Boston and D.C. The first trains ran under wires to Boston on January 31, 2000. Just under a year after that, on December 11, 2000, the Acela Express made its maiden voyage between Washington, D.C. and Boston, and although it was able to hit a top speed of 150 miles per hour in some places, it still took almost 7 hours to traverse the 457 miles between its two terminals, mostly due to the older parts of its route where speed limits could dip as low as 50 miles per hour. Unfortunately, these sections of low-speed tracks still slow down the Acela to this day, but let's look past that and recognize the Acela as what it is, America's first high-speed train. With such an achievement, Amtrak decided to take a break, so once again the development of new high-speed rail networks came to a standstill, with the Acela providing the only high-speed service in the country. Finally, almost a decade later, in late 2009, Lone Star High-Speed Rail LLC was formed to build a Dallas to Houston high-speed rail inspired by Japan's Shinkansen, which at that point had been built into a massive network, in some cases going as fast as 200 miles per hour. This company later came to be known as Texas Central, which I'll talk more about later. Later that year, on June 29, 2009, BNSF unveiled their vehicle project HH-20B, which was America's first modern hydrogen fuel cell locomotive. Although it wasn't high-speed rail related at all, the HH-20B would be America's first zero-emissions locomotive, foreshadowing the zero-emissions arms race that would ensue in the near future. Rebuilt from a rail-powered GG-20B genset locomotive, the HH-20B made 2,000 horsepower, all while creating no emissions but water, and although it wasn't much of a success, it served as a proof of concept for future railroads to take inspiration from. Similarly, a few years later, on September 28, 2014, Norfolk Southern unveiled their BP-4 locomotive. Rebuilt from a GP-38, the BP-4 was America's first modern battery electric locomotive, much like the HH-20B was America's first modern hydrogen fuel cell locomotive, but similarly, the BP-4 never saw any considerable success on the railroad, but it still served as a benchmark for future battery locomotives. A few months later, on November 12, 2014, a new company known as All Aboard Florida began construction on a new higher speed rail line connecting two of Florida's biggest cities, Miami and Orlando. This initial construction would take place on the line between Miami and West Palm Beach, now known as Brightline, America's first privately funded high-speed rail. Following this construction, on January 6, 2015, California's state-funded high-speed rail project began construction on its line in the Central Valley. Unlike Brightline, which would use diesel trains, California High-Speed Rail would use 200-mile-per-hour electric trains, the likes of which had never been seen in America. Later in 2015, on April 13th, the Dallas streetcar began service, which may not seem like a big deal, but this would be America's first passenger train to use battery electric power, as in order to operate on part of the line which lacks overhead wires, trains would use onboard battery packs. The next year, on August 26, 2016, Amtrak announced their order of 28 all-new Avalia Liberty train sets, which would replace the first generation Acelas. These new trains would be able to operate at up to 220 miles per hour with proper infrastructure upgrades, but without these upgrades, they would just serve as a replacement for the aging first-gen Acelas. A few years later, only about 4 years after construction began, Brightline ran their inaugural service on their line between Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach on January 13, 2018. Later in the year, service would begin to Miami, and construction would continue for the line to Orlando. Additionally, towards the end of the year, on September 18, 2018, Brightline announced their acquisition of Express West, a high-speed rail line between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. It would soon be rebranded to Brightline West, showing the transportation world that Brightline intended to expand their network to across the country. Just over a year later, on September 22, 2019, Wabtec released their new FLX drive locomotive, America's first battery electric long-distance freight locomotive. This FLX drive locomotive, otherwise known as the BEL 44C4D, would create a comparable amount of power to its diesel counterpart, all while producing zero emissions. Continuing the theme of zero emissions trains, on November 15, 2019, future California commuter rail Aero ordered a Stadler Flirt train powered by hydrogen fuel cell. Not only was this America's first hydrogen fuel cell passenger train, but it was also one of the first Stadler-built trains in America, which are very common in Europe. Just under a year later, in the summer of 2020, about a year after Wabtec's announcement of their FLX drive locomotive, Progress Rail, Wabtec's biggest competitor, issued their rebuttal to the FLX battery electric freight locomotive, releasing their new Joule platform. While FLX drive bared similarities to past locomotives, Joule was an all-new design, resembling no other American locomotive before it. About a year later, on July 7, 2021, Amtrak announced a $7.3 billion contract with Siemens Mobility for an entire fleet of all-new train sets, making for the biggest equipment order in Amtrak's history. This order would replace aging equipment across Amtrak's system, some of which was over 40 years old, with brand new Siemens-built trains, which many considered to be some of the best. Not only would these trains improve passenger experiences with modernized interiors, but they would also improve Amtrak's environmental impact, creating fewer diesel emissions than any other passenger trains in America. Additionally, included in this order was a small fleet of experimental battery electric train sets, which would be the first in Amtrak's history, once again showing Amtrak's commitment to creating modern, environmentally friendly transportation. Speaking of environmentally friendly transportation, just a few months later, on November 4th, 2021, Canadian National announced their order of one Wabtec FLX drive battery locomotive, becoming the first railroad in North America to order one of these new long-distance battery locomotives. Although CN only ordered one locomotive, this announcement created quite a bit of hype in the freight rail industry, leading to a few subsequent battery locomotive orders from North American railroads. The next month, on December 6, 2021, Union Pacific announced their plan to have net zero emissions by 2050 through the use of battery electric locomotives and low-carbon fuels. This would ensue in an order for the railroad's first zero-emissions locomotives, which I'll talk about later. A few weeks later, on December 14, 2021, after concluding a period of testing a Wabtec FLX drive battery locomotive, BNSF entered an agreement with Progress Rail and Chevron to develop a hydrogen fuel cell locomotive. This positioned BNSF as a railroad that placed their support under hydrogen fuel cell as the future, as opposed to battery electric, so at this point it became clear to many that there would soon be an arms race between hydrogen and batteries to determine which, if any, will become the future of North American freight rail. In other hydrogen rail news, a month later, on January 24, 2022, Canadian Pacific unveiled their first zero-emissions locomotive, known as the H2O-EL. Rebuilt from an SD40-2F diesel, this locomotive was the first of 3 hydrogen fuel cell locomotives built by CP. 4 days later, on the 28th, Union Pacific placed their support in battery locomotives, ordering 20 battery electric locomotives from Progress Rail and Wabtec, with 10 locomotives being built by each manufacturer. To date, this is the largest North American order for battery electric freight locomotives, with a much larger order likely being placed once Union Pacific determines which of these 2 locomotives is superior. A few weeks later, on February 8th, the first Siemens ALC-42 locomotive entered service on Amtrak, beginning the process of replacing older polluting Genesis locomotives with new locomotives, creating 89% fewer emissions. Finally, on March 9, 2022, Via Rail, Canada's national passenger railroad, proposed a new electrified line between Toronto and Quebec City, potentially creating Canada's first high-speed rail. Depending on how this project is managed, this could do for Canada what the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act did for America over 30 years ago. With that, we're at the current day, but that's not the end of our story. What does the future hold? Well, considering the fact that people are becoming more focused on creating transportation that's better for the environment, the future seems pretty bright. Let's take a look. Speaking of bright, not too far from now, in early 2023, Brightline West plans to begin construction on their new 180-mile-per-hour electrified high-speed rail line between just outside of Los Angeles and Las Vegas. Additionally, later in 2023, Brightline, the one in Florida, will begin service to Orlando, finally completing the original plan for Miami to Orlando service. Additionally, trains will travel at up to 125 miles per hour, making Brightline a legitimately fast train service compared to right now, when it only goes 79 miles per hour at most. Finally, around the same time, Texas Central plans to begin construction on their Dallas to Houston line as well, making 2023 a big year for high-speed rail construction across the country. Unfortunately though, construction may not actually begin at this time, as Texas Central is still dealing with some land disputes. This is just a projection of when they expect to begin. In other high-speed rail news, Amtrak plans to have the first Acela 2 trains in service by the end of 2023. While they were initially planned to enter service in 2021, mechanical issues with the trains have delayed their debut quite a bit, as modifications have to be made to the trains in order to begin service. Separate from all the high-speed rail construction, throughout 2023 and into early 2024, railroads such as Union Pacific, Canadian National, and multiple Australian railroads will begin to receive their first battery electric locomotives, which they've placed orders for over the past few years. This is when the competition between battery and hydrogen trains will truly begin in North America, as 2023 will mark the beginning of the widespread adoption of both of these zero-emissions power sources. In early 2025, Caltrain, the commuter rail that runs between San Francisco and San Jose, California, will complete CalMod, their project to modernize their commuter network with electric trains. While this isn't necessarily high-speed rail, it's what many consider to be the first true modernized commuter rail in the United States using European-style trains and infrastructure. Later in 2025, Amtrak will have received their full fleet of 28 Acela 2 train sets, allowing for the retirement of Amtrak's first high-speed trains. When they're retired, most likely at least one train will be preserved, as these trains marked a very historic part of railroad history in America, but the trains that will replace these 1990s era train sets will be more efficient, faster, and nicer for passengers. From this point on, tentative dates for each of these projects become a little bit more ambiguous. At some point in 2026, Brightline West service will begin between Victorville, California and Las Vegas, Nevada. Of course, that is assuming that construction begins on time in 2023, but right now they're on track to begin then. In the same year, on the other side of the country, Florida's Brightline, which may be rebranded to Brightline East, will complete their extension west of Orlando International Airport to Disney Springs, providing a connection between the airport and one of Orlando's biggest tourist attractions. A few years later, in 2028, Texas Central will hopefully complete construction and begin service, assuming that they begin construction on time in 2023. Although I didn't talk about it much during High Speed Rail Week 2, it's still a big part of America's future high-speed rail network, using Japanese N700S train sets capable of 200 miles per hour. Additionally, by 2028, Brightline will complete their extension to Tampa, Florida, creating a full-length higher-speed rail line between Miami and Tampa, Florida's two biggest metropolitan areas. The next year, again, if all goes according to plan, California High-Speed Rail will open their initial Central Valley segment of their line, finally creating the high-speed rail service in California that will have been in the works for over 3 decades. As for the rest of the line, construction will continue for a few more years. By the end of the next year, 2030, Amtrak will have a brand new fleet of trains built by Siemens Mobility, including dual-mode diesel and electric locomotives, in addition to some battery locomotives. Additionally, the majority of their fleet will comprise of the same types of Siemens Venture cars, making for easier fleet maintenance among many other benefits. Finally, in 2033, California High-Speed Rail will begin service between San Francisco and Los Angeles, making what will most likely be one of America's most important rail corridors. After this point, who's to say what'll happen? Hopefully, by this point, most politicians will agree that the United States needs national high-speed rail, allowing for the full construction of an electrified, high-speed, and environmentally friendly network, but who knows? Anything could happen. Perhaps we could see maglev technology, or perhaps high-speed rail will continue to be a thing only seen in a select few regions. Ultimately, all we can hope for is the best with the continued development of high-speed rail in North America. In an ideal world, these projects could be completed, but unfortunately, as such a divided nation, there's bound to be pushback. Between industry lobbyists convincing politicians to oppose these projects, NIMBYs, and people ignorant to the economic and environmental benefits of high-speed rail, it won't be easy, but maybe one day, many years from now, the United States may finally have a high-speed rail network that can lead the rest of the world instead of lag behind. This has been an episode of American High-Speed Rail Week 2 presented by WorldwideRailfan. If you're watching this when it's new, stay tuned for tomorrow's episode, but if you're watching this after it's been uploaded, then click on the end cards to see the previous and preceding videos of this series. Additionally, if you want to see more content like this in the future, do consider subscribing, as these videos take a lot of work to make, and your support is always appreciated. With that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon in another episode.